Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Keesa Schreane, and welcome to the Refinitiv Perspectives live stream series. You can subscribe to the blog by heading over to refinitiv.com/perspectives. Well, hedging against future exposures is on the minds of many in the investment community today. And this makes foreign exchange, that market, an interesting place to be. Joining me today is Jill Sigelbaum, head of FXall, Refinitiv's buy-side foreign exchange trading platform. That is a mouthful. Jill, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Keesa, and thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Great, good to see you. So, Jill, you head up one of the largest dealer-to-client FX platforms globally, and many FX traders are working virtually now, as many of us are, and being a bit more detached than they've been in the past to other traders, to their colleagues. They perhaps could use a little affirmation about what they're seeing in the market. So could you, first of all, let us know what you are hearing from your peers or from your clients about what's going on in the FX markets, what's happening around volumes, for example, and what big themes you're hearing about?
Sure, Keesa. Well, it's been, really unprecedented times for all. I don't think that, the FX market has been quiet for the last few years. So, in some respects, the industry is welcoming the volatility in the market, but it comes at, a very unexpected time or through unexpected circumstances. I think what everyone's seeing for the last 2 months, starting when the pandemic really started to grow globally, is as the equities market started moving rapidly, we saw a huge move in the FX market as well. As our clients were rebalancing their portfolios, rehedging, determining what to do next. I think it's all very, for some scary times because we haven't seen this volatility probably since Brexit. So it's, very, very interesting times.
So would you equate this amount of volatility to Brexit, or is it much larger if we look at it in context? How does it compare to a Brexit or even 2008, if you will?
Yeah, so, obviously, again, Brexit was a time of unexpected behavior. And, when that happens, the market goes a little bit crazy. I think, again, we're in a time of unknown circumstances. And as the fixed income and equities markets are moving, the foreign exchange market, particularly on the buy side, is moving, I wouldn't say along with it, but to finance the trades in that market. So what we see on the back of that, and our sectors trade foreign exchange in slightly different, from different perspectives. So we'll see that the corporate world is looking at their portfolios and their businesses and how they need to fund their businesses going forward and repositioning their portfolios to accommodate that. Of course, there's still a lot of unknown in the future around what will occur in different sectors of the corporate industry. So again, there's a lot of undetermined behavior going on. I think we're still navigating through that. In the asset management space, the asset managers who are weighted heavily in foreign equities are also repositioning their portfolios. What we're seeing through all this volatility are widened spreads and, lapses in liquidity in certain currency pairs.
Great. So one of the things that we've seen transition over the past decade plus is electronic trading platforms, right? They've grown and they've evolved, but you mentioned something very important. This was very unforeseen. So how have electronic trading platforms evolved to support this new remote culture specifically?
So that's a good question. I think no one ever tested for the circumstances that we're in now. And surprisingly, it's gone smoothly well. I think we'll all look back on this time and see how smooth it went given the circumstances. So our crew, our relationship managers started working immediately on day one when this started to happen in getting all of our clients up and running virtually. And, I have to say, knock on wood, it's gone, without too many hiccups. I think part of it helps that we are a regulated platform. So, we're forced to test for all types of unforeseen circumstances. I can't say we ever tested for this circumstance with everyone working from home at the same time. I don't think anyone ever expected this to occur, but our infrastructure has supported it very well.
Okay. And have you heard the same from your clients in terms of their infrastructure?
I think there's been some hiccups. Certainly, it's probably different for each sector. So we did a survey to our clients, and what we found out was through their BCP processes that the buy side were typically immediately working from home when, again, FX is a global business. So depending on when this pandemic hit that country or city is when people migrated out of the office to work from home to be safe. And primarily the buy side are almost 100% working from home now. And that went very well. On the sell side, the banks rely a little bit more on their infrastructure on the trading desk. So what we found, most banks have split up their teams where a third of their team will work from the office, separated, of course. A third of the team are working from home, and the last third are working from a disaster recovery site.
Wow.
And it's gone pretty well. I mean, obviously there are hiccups. I think at the beginning, probably for the banks, the most difficult thing was phone lines. They're used to having many phone lines that are recorded on their desk. And as this happened so immediately, I think they were in a situation where they didn't have that infrastructure. And it actually, I think, forced people to focus more on their electronic trading rather than voice, because that was the piece that became more challenging. Over the last few weeks, it's probably normalized to some extent. People were becoming set up the way they needed to be.
So do you have any helpful hints for maybe some firms that are still, particularly the smaller buy-side firms that are still having some issues? Are you able to share some information that you've received from peers about how they can mitigate some of the issues they might be seeing now in terms of transitioning to the electronic trading platform while working remotely?
Well, we've seen, we expected during this period that our sales team would have a difficult time getting in touch with prospects and getting their attention because we assumed people would be focused on different things. Surprisingly, we're getting a lot of attention. I think people are now in need more than ever of electronic solutions, and particularly solutions that give them access to many liquidity providers at once. I think you and I talked about the other day how, desktop real estate now is becoming an issue when people are working from home because they don't have all the screens that they're used to in the office. Mm-hmm. So when they're forced to use one screen, they have to be very pragmatic as to how they use that real estate on their desktop. And we found that clients more than ever now want access to our multi-dealer platform because as one of the more mature platforms, we give them access to all instrument types. We have, probably the deepest set of functionality of any platform out there, as well as, access to 200 liquidity providers in our RFQ platform and over 25 bank algo providers with an assortment of 125 algos. So in the past, where some of our clients would connect directly to the banks, maybe to run their algos or just to, speak to the salesperson on the phone, we're finding more and more it's practical for them to use our application to have one screen where they can access 125 algos instead of logging into 20 different applications to access those algos.
So now going back to the buy side specifically, and we know that there are several sectors, if you will, within the buy side. Could we take a look at the buy side sector by sector to talk through what are some of their specific challenges? You mentioned asset managers a bit earlier. Could you go through sector by sector and share with us what are some of their challenges and what are some possible solutions to how they're dealing with things as they are right now?
Sure. So I think if you start with the corporate sector, which is, we're considered the number one platform for corporates here in the U.S. I think for them right now, the challenge in their business is, as I mentioned earlier, not really knowing when the world will open up again for business. So certain industries are hit harder than others. Obviously we all know the airline industry is being hit very hard right now as no one is flying. Other industries are doing very well. So, FX in these international corporations is used to basically fund and hedge their business. So it's very different even within that sector as to what their foreign exchange needs are. Fortunately, using our platform makes it very easy for them to move in and out of the FX market as they have to make decisions around their business needs. Mm-hmm. In the asset management sector, well, it's, I think right now is, it's probably a challenge and an opportunity for some. With volatility in the market, it sort of depends on what side your portfolio is on, whether you're doing well or not. So, again, for them, just having immediate access to trade easily is what's so important. And, we've been, our relationship management team and support teams have been working 24/7 to ensure that our clients have full, easy access with secure passwords to get into our system from wherever they choose to trade from. In the bank sector, what we're seeing there is more, and, in the past, the bank's strategy was to internalize as much flow as possible. What we've seen is, a lot of the buy side flow, which is what the banks react to, has been moving potentially in the same direction, which eliminates the bank's ability to internalize that flow. So what we've seen is more and more trading on our primary market platform matching. Also, I think when the market dips in liquidity, people move to the primary market to ensure that they can access the liquidity that they need. So we've seen a big uptick there as well. It's been very good for our platforms.
So we will be opening up to questions from the audience shortly, but meantime, let's move from talking about the sectors to talking about the business, talking about the human aspect. Trading obviously is a pretty competitive environment. And my question, Jill, is this competitive nature that's inherent in the trading environment, is it taking a new shape in the current environment? What do you think the future of competitive trading is going to be, particularly with what we're going through now?
Well, I do think we will, always revert back to our competitive states. But now in these times, I think what I've seen more than ever, and it's been lovely to see, is a real collaboration in the industry. All of the industry groups have come together. I think people want to help each other more and more. There's a real personal, intimate aspect now to the market, and where it may have been more ruthless in the past, it's now becoming very collaborative, and I hope that some of that gets retained in the future, because it's actually quite nice.
Could you give us an example? Have you seen this firsthand with maybe a client story or something of that nature?
Well, I think my colleagues and I all sit on industry groups, and these industry groups are meeting on a regular basis now to check in with one another, see how everyone's doing, check in on the market. Everyone feels detached working from home. So even though they have their technology solutions and can see where the market is going, you miss that human aspect of talking to the person next to you and, getting up and speaking to someone across the hall about what's happening in their world. So I think these industry groups now have brought a different element of transparency and sharing that I've never seen before. People are usually pretty, holding their cards close to their chest about what their businesses are doing. And now people are much more open about it.
Sure. Well, we have a couple of questions from the live stream. So thank you to everyone on the live stream. First question, have you seen any major issues in liquidity access in the market with the COVID-19 disruption and voice brokers probably not at their full capacity?
So yes, that has been an issue that we've heard about, particularly the first month of this. I think, as I said earlier, the one thing people didn't take into account in working virtually is having all of these recorded phone lines set up, handily. As we all know, in this new regulated environment, banks aren't allowed to speak on unrecorded lines. So I think dealing with the interdealer brokers became a challenge. And again, I think that pushed more and more flow to the electronic space. As far as liquidity goes, we have seen, I suppose I answered that question. The access to liquidity has moved more and more to electronic from voice.
Thank you. In your view, will TCA become a more central theme in the buy-side trading area due to this disruption?
I think that TCA was already becoming a central theme for the buy side. So will this disruption expedite that? Absolutely. I think this disruption will actually expedite many things, one of which is TCA, but just making the most use of electronic tools, electronic trading, one point of access to many. I think this has really made people think about how much more efficient they can be by using these tools.
Okay. From a BCP perspective, I'm going to get rid of some of these acronyms. From a business continuity perspective, planning perspective, has the sell side responded differently to the buy side or corporates, for example?
So we did a survey of our clients to see, how people were responding to this, and we discovered it was a little bit more challenging for the banks to move quickly into their BCP, again, because of their reliance on the trading floor. But I think everyone has gotten there over the last month, and people are now working in, things are getting back to normal as far as trading goes, but in this new virtual environment. So it's interesting how quickly we adjusted to this new norm.
Jill, will this bring some change to the work environment for traders with FX moving to work from home and tech business support all working in sync? So even though you lack human interaction in close office buildings?
Absolutely. I think this will change. I really think this will change the way people work forever. Will we go back to the way we were when all this is over? Hopefully. I think we all miss that human contact. But I do think there will be a hybrid model going forward. We've basically proven that this can work, and it can work efficiently. It can probably work even more efficiently than it has if people prepared a little bit more and had that time to prepare. But I think this will change. I think it's probably given everyone a comfort level that this can work. No one ever tried having their entire organization work virtually, and I don't think anyone would have ever even tested for that. But now we were forced to test for that, and it's worked quite well. I've heard in some cases, people are more productive than they ever were. So I think it will change things for good.
What about the use of algorithms? Have you seen any impact on the use of algos, Jill?
We actually have, and I think that's because there have been, dips in liquidity and I think the unknown looming out there of where the market is going. So we've seen a huge increase in algo use over the last month, particularly at that point in time between mid-February and mid-March, where the market was the most volatile and certain currency pairs were becoming very liquid, spreads were widening. We still see wide spreads in emerging market pairs, as well as some G10 currency pairs still haven't reverted back to sort of their normal spreads. So I do think people are using algos more and more. And again, some of them hadn't embarked on using algos and sort of were forced to because they felt that they needed to, in the current market conditions, it was the best way of executing large transactions.
You mentioned earlier, Jill, that about the human aspect and how that has changed and there's a lot more collaboration. Do you see a certain degree of transparency with what we're experiencing now? And do you expect that transparency level specifically to change as we move into a new normal?
No, I actually think people are enjoying this level of transparency. Now, will it probably, when people are back in their office and they feel that they have a level of transparency internally within their organization, they'll probably be less likely to go outside of their organization to get that. I think right now people are grasping at straws. So they'll take what they can get and feel obliged to share as well because they're so craving of information from others. So we probably will go back to a state with, I wouldn't say less transparency. That's a very, that's a large term. But I think we'll go back to potentially less sharing across institutions on what people are doing, whereas today people are being very open about what they're seeing and doing.
Right. Another question from the live stream: how did banks uphold their obligations to record interactions? Are they now recording Zoom meetings and WebEx meetings to replace phone-based trades?
That's a good question, and I do not know the answer to that. I don't know how the banks are reporting those meetings. I don't have the answer. Probably they are recording their virtual meetings. I know, we do. So in our organization, we record many of our virtual meetings. So I would presume that they are as well.
Is there any difference in the impact of COVID that you've seen on the FX markets on a regional basis? So US versus Europe or Asia?
That's an interesting question. I think, well, certainly Europe and the US, COVID seemed to hit at the same time. So the reaction was synchronized. Asia, it hit a little bit earlier, so they were working virtually about a month before we were in the US and in Europe. I think it became, and maybe that helped us as well, because it became this phased in approach across the organization as FX is global. So anyone who's trading FX or in the FX market has operations across the globe. And, it was almost like a wave. People saw it coming and had some ability to get ready for it. Not much, though. It did hit pretty quickly over here.
Right. Do you have a view on the FX global code? Do you see this COVID disruption speeding up the adoption of the code?
I do believe that it does have a positive impact on the code as people are forced to, to think about the guidelines of the code in these unprecedented circumstances. I know that certain institutions who are very worried about proving that they're upholding the code because of the circumstances. Again, at the beginning of this, people were in situations where they had to make do with whatever access they had to the market, and they may not have had the right tools to prove that they're upholding the code. But I do believe that it was in everyone's mind during this time, and people were making best efforts to uphold the code and prove that they were upholding the code.
And Jill, just for those of us who are maybe unfamiliar with the FX market specifically, could you give a bit of a description on what the FX code is that you're referring to?
Yeah, so just historically, the FX market was an unregulated market. It's a global market. Over time, regulation has come into play, but the regulation has been through different jurisdictions. So every region has its own regulations. We've all heard of Dodd-Frank. We've heard of MiFID. So the global code was put in place to basically continue to self-regulate the FX industry. So it is a set of guidelines that the industry follows in order to trade in a safe and healthy environment. And it's been adopted by all the banks globally, and many of the buy side have been adopting it as well. And we as a platform also uphold the code. Now, just to add to that, the code is particularly relevant to spot trading because spot trading is not part of the regulated infrastructure. So while it's not only appropriate for spot trading, it was meant to ensure that there were guidelines around that, but it's really guidelines around overall FX trading.
Got it. And our last question, Jill, from your experience, what do you think the approach will be from the regulators and central banks looking to support the FX industry going forward?
Well, I actually think that while the regulators and central banks have been extremely challenged in this time to keep their economies running, I think when it comes to the FX industry, I think they are quite pleased with how robust it's been. And, I think that, they're sort of proud and pleased that it's run as smoothly as it has. And I'm not sure that, other than promoting the global code, which they've all been doing and will continue to do, I'm not sure there's any other major aspects that come out of this.
Well, Jill Sigelbaum, head of FXall, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Keesa. Appreciate it.
And
stay well.
You too. Thank you. Be well, Jill. Good to see you. We also want to thank everyone for participating, joining us on the live stream and asking such fantastic questions. If you've enjoyed today's live stream, there is a webinar about the future of trading. It's going to happen on April 30th. You can register by scanning the QR code, should be right about here, or heading to the URL also on the screen now. If you have further questions about the FX market or FXall specifically, you can reach out to Refinitiv at fx.info@refinitiv.com. This is Keesa Schreane. Thank you for joining me. Have a fantastic day and be well.